Okay, this is first Motivational Monday webinar that we've done. This is on efficient and effective kiln loading. Sorry it's on Tuesday. We're still kind of getting used to the technology. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is things to consider before you load your kiln. We all have shelf racks, or you all have shelf racks in your studios. And one of the things that can help you out is if you can store everything in your drying racks or your shelf racks by height. That way, when you load them in the kiln, you get the most efficient kind of disbursement of shelves. You don't have a lot of wasted space. And one thing that can help you load them by size is if you take a kiln post of varying sizes and put them on different sizes of your shelf. So, this might be an 8-inch post, 6-inch post, 4-inch post. Another thing that might be helpful is to go ahead and cut out a piece of cardboard or something, an old kiln box, something the size of your shelf, well, maybe a full shelf. And go ahead and put that on your drying rack. And when you place your pieces up there, you'll know when you have a full shelf if that piece of cardboard is full. Another thing that you might want to consider doing before you load your kiln is vacuum out your elements. And if you vacuum out your elements, every time would be nice, but if you vacuum out your elements at least every couple of weeks, then all of that dust and little bits of glaze and stuff that can settle all your elements will be out of there. That's one of the things that burns out elements really quick, is if they have a lot of debris sitting on them. So if you get the habit of vacuuming out your shelf, then you're going to be a lot better off. You're going to vacuum out your elements, and next thing you're going to do is you're going to check your shelf. Your shelf has kiln wash on it, hopefully. If it doesn't, you might just be using stilts. But it's always a good idea, even if you're using stilts, to use kiln wash, just in case something runs off. If you have some glaze that's really heavy on there, it could run off the piece down the stilts and fuse the stilt to the shelf, which is no fun. You have to chip it off and then grind it. So when you're putting on kiln wash, one thing you want to consider is go ahead and leave a 1/2-inch border around the edge. Unfortunately, we didn't do this in our video. This is where the shot is from. But what that does is when you're handling the shelves, you're always handling them from the end. And if you have your fingers on some kiln wash, it can flake off onto some of the glaze pieces, which isn't good. So also only coat one side. You never want to coat the bottom of a shelf, because then it can also flake off. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how the kiln fires. Heat work is a combination of time and temperature. And how that heat work transfers to the pieces is done through either radiation, convection, or conduction. Now, radiation is the infrared heat actually radiating off of the elements onto the pieces, kind of like the sun. Convection, like a convection oven, is transferred through the air. And conduction is actually transferred through through actual contact, so maybe the piece touching the shelf. So let's talk about radiation first. Since you want we say that you want your pieces to see the heat. Now, I know I told you to load shelves by heights to get maximum performance, but if you find out that you're getting some pieces in the middle that are not quite up to snuff or aren't or under fired, you might want to, in order to alleviate that problem, is to what we call dome the load. So you're putting the taller pieces in the middle and the shallower pieces on the outside. That way the radiation from the elements can see all the pieces. Another thing you want to make sure you do is to place your shelves so they're in between the elements. You don't want to be blocking the shelves or the elements with your shelves. That way you get adequate radiation between each shelf. A lot of people fire tiles, and that's where you can run into some trouble because a lot of people try to post it really low, and you can actually post it so you have no element shining in there. You want to try to get at least 2 grooves radiating through the piece. So radiation usually happens when it gets up to red heat. Before that, it's mostly conduction and convection. All right, so let's talk about convection. If you don't have a downdraft vent, you should really consider getting one. The convection really helps move the air around. It doesn't just bring it down from the top, but it creates a little turbulence in there that really gets in between the pieces. So in order to encourage convection, you can do certain things when you're loading your shelves. One is use half shelves and put a 1/4 inch gap between the shelves. That allows the heat to work its way through the center of the kiln, which is where it's toughest for the heat to get. Another thing you can do is, we show like full shelves here, but you can also stagger the shelves. So you might have a half shelf at this level and then the next one down at this level. That way the air can work its way down through there easier. Okay, and the last one is what we call conduction. This is really conduction. Actually, it's not a good representation of it, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. Conduction is something that can really hurt you. If you have pieces touching the thermocouple, for example, the conduction will actually make the piece that it's touching fire cooler. So if you're touching your thermocouple with a piece or a shelf, for example, your kiln's going to think that it is cooler than it actually is, so you will get an overfire. Another thing that will affect you negatively is fire on the bottom of your kiln. The reason we post up 1 inch, at least 1 inch from the bottom, is not only to make sure that we don't cover up these vent holes down here, but also to allow some of that heat to get underneath the shelf. So the bottom of the kiln and the top of the kiln fire the coolest. So if we get some heat under that shelf, when your piece is sitting on the shelf, you don't lose heat through conduction because that shelf is a little cooler. Okay, let's talk about actual loading. So one of the most important things to think about when you're loading your kiln is clearances. You want to see at least 2 inches from the top, not only because that's where you lose a lot of heat, and also you have these, if you have a downdraft vent, you have holes on the top of your lid, and if you load pieces too close to those holes, then it can tend to burn out some of the glazes. But I think with this last slide we saw back here, this is an example where somebody loaded it up too tall, and what happens is the pieces actually expand when they're firing. So you might think that you have clearance, but if it's too close, both the lid and the piece are going to expand and grow closer to each other. So you can end up getting a piece stuck to the lid. Another important clearance is the side of the kiln. Your shelves kind of dictate that, but oftentimes if you have a bowl or something, you can hang over the shelf and actually get very close to the elements. This might cause a glaze to boil. If you have a wheel throwing program and you are firing greenware, it can make a real hard spot on it, so it won't accept the glaze. So we like to see at least an inch from the walls for the ware, not just the shelves. We talked about the bottom. The thermocouple, which isn't in here, is also an issue. You want to have, if you consider when you're loading your shelves, if you put a tennis ball over the piece, then that's the kind of clearance you want, about 2 inches from the thermocouple. The same would go for your, if you have a kiln sitter kiln, which hopefully people have upgraded to automatic kilns by now, but if you have a kiln sitter kiln, you don't want anything around there that'll interfere with the bending of the cone. Another important thing to think about when you're loading your kiln is the keeping the posts aligned, meaning they're on top of each other in between, with the shelf in between. And what that does is it makes sure that weight is transferred directly through a column to the slab. If you had posts over here, and over here, then you're going to put a lot more strain on your shelf. You could maybe cause warping in your shelf. Okay, so we want, like I said, at least 2 inches from the thermocouple. The reason I put this slide up is it's you can kind of see how the shelf fits in there. And it can be pretty tight getting around thermocouples, especially if you have zone control and you have more than one. So a good rule of thumb is to load the half shelf that's going to be under the thermocouple first before you load the other side of the half shelf. That gives you a little more room to get under the thermocouple. And when you're loading the shelves, it's nice to put your hands in places where you definitely don't want to hit the kiln. If you're loading this shelf, you might want to put your hand in between on this spot right here, so you can feel the thermocouple with the back of your hand. Make sure you don't bump it, because if you bump it and it cracks, then you'll have to replace it. Another thing that's helpful is if you have your employees kind of hold it on the edges, the farthest edges where they're most likely to bang the shelf into the side. That'll keep them from doing that, and your kilns will last a lot longer. Another trick for getting a few more pieces in is, these are supposed to be stilts, and these are your shelf posts right here. If I did not raise these up, I'd only be able to get 2 of these bowls on the shelf. And by using your post to kind of lift it up a little bit, you can kind of nest the edge of this underneath this piece here, and same thing on this side, and get a little more room. Okay, hot and cold spots. Every kiln is kind of unique. It'll have its own hot and cold spots. But in general, kilns fire cool on the top and on the bottom. And the reason for that is because, well, you have elements in the side, but all this area up here and down here doesn't have any elements in it. And heat rises, so you lose a lot through the lid, but you also lose a lot through the slab too. So to compensate for this, you want to try to distribute the mass in a way that compensates for these hot and cold spots. If you had a perfectly evenly fired kiln, then ideally you'd want to load the mass evenly. If you load everything concentrated in one area, it takes longer for that wear to heat up, especially if you're firing faster. And it kind of drags behind the rest of the kiln that might be fired or loaded a lot lighter. So that being the case, you usually want to load most of your mass in the center of the kiln and load it light on the top and the bottom, and that'll help fire it, make it fire more evenly. Especially if you notice that your kiln, maybe your bottom element's getting a little old, but not quite ready to replace, and you find that your wear is wearing or is underfired on the bottom. Instead of 1 inch, you might want to try loading up posting up 2 inches from the bottom, just to get you by, so you can get a little more time out of that element. Okay, unloading. In our manual, I think we say wait until it's 125 degrees to unload, and I know a lot of you are probably popping the lid at 600 degrees and putting on gloves and hot potatoing all these pieces out because you need to turn the kiln around. But that's not only bad for the wear; it can cause the glaze to craze. but it's also bad for your kiln. The expansion and contraction is really what beats up the brick. And when you pop the lid too early, you'll start hearing these little pings, and that's either the wear or the brick crazing. So wait till at least 300 degrees and ideally longer than that. You want to record your results. We suggest that everybody use cones to fire the kilns. Witness cones, those are pyrometric cones that you put on your shelf that bend to a certain degree to indicate how much heat work came in there. As your thermocouples start to age, they're going to age towards an overfire, so you'll get a good indication when to change your thermocouple when that cone starts knuckling down on the shelf. Also, if things do go wrong, the first thing our tech guys are going to ask you when you call is, what did the cones look like? Because if the wear didn't turn out right, that's not always a good indication that the kiln didn't fire correctly. It could just be that, the application was too heavy or something like that. With this new product, Kiln we have, it connects your kiln to our server, which is, served up through the cloud, and we log pretty much all that data for you except for, what your cones look like. And it also has a space where you can make little notes, and you'll always have that. And another benefit of it is our technicians have access to it. So you can just give them your serial number and voltage and phase, and they can find you and look through all the log results and tell exactly what's going on with your kiln. Another advantage to KilnLink is you can get alerts on your smartphone. So if you want to unload your kiln the most efficiently, it would be nice to know exactly when it's at 300 degrees or 125 degrees or whenever you want to load it. It'll send you a text alert, and then you can go unload it and not wasting any time. The last thing I'd like to talk about is safety. Loading kiln shelves can be a little hard on your back if you do it a long time. We now have 5/8" shelves, and so do a lot of distributors and other kiln manufacturers. They're a little lighter. There's other types of shelves that are a little more expensive, but for most contemporary studios, the 5/8" shelves seem to work great. A lot of times you might have some height-challenged employees, and you don't want them falling into the kiln on a 27" kiln. It happens. So sometimes having a stool or maybe putting some cinder blocks or pavers next to the kiln helps them get up a little higher to place the stuff in there. Also, you want to check your hardware. Some of our older kilns were made without lid lifters, so they're not spring assisted. And if you were to maybe bump the lid brace and the lid were to fall down, that's like 100 pounds coming down on your head, which is not very much fun. Always a good idea, whether you have a lid lifter or not, to go ahead and check for corrosion, tighten up screws, especially around the lid brace, to make sure when your employees are loading the kilns that they're safe and that the lid brace is not going to pop off or just fall out of its groove. So that's all I had as far as the presentation goes, and I am going to try to see if I can see all you guys on here. Are you there, Cool Cats?
Yep, I'm here.
Hello. Okay. What was your question?
I do use post, but I was interested in kiln washing because we all know that, some of the glaze drips down. When you do the kiln wash, how often do you do it? And I've also heard people talking that, well, the kiln wash flakes off and attaches the pieces. How do you avoid that?
Well, what you do is you when it starts getting flaky, you'll see it starting to get flaky as it gets older. You want to make sure that it's not going to flake off onto your pieces. So when it starts getting flaky, then it's time to go ahead and scrape the shells off with a wire brush and hit it with a sponge and just put a new coating on it. Did that answer your question? It can vary. It depends on your kiln wash that you're using. how often you're firing, what temperature you're going to. Another time that you want to replace things is if you actually get a piece stuck to the shelf, then it's going to pull off the kiln wash, and that's why you're using it, so it doesn't stick to the shelf. So then you're going to get all these little bare spots on there, and you can fill those in for a period of time, but after a while your shelf's going to get really uneven, and you're just going to want to scrape everything off and start over. Does that help?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, here's a question from Rachel about how to tell if something is underfired or overfired. It's usually by the gloss level or the color. A lot of colors, when you overfire them, you actually burn out the color. When it's underfired, it might look matte, not as shiny, or not quite as bright of a color as you want. Hopefully that helps. Monrovia, can you hear me?
Okay. All right. Yes, I do. Thank you. My question was about elements when they begin to sag outside of the kiln wall. And in the past, I've used pins, element pins, to push them back in. Is that a satisfactory solution over a reasonably long period of time?
Yeah, you can actually, it depends why they're falling out. Usually when they fall out, it's either because the pins fell out, so you might want to go check the pins around your, all around every element groove. Or it could be that you have a piece of broken brick with the lip kind of broken out. And
I do. I have that.
Yeah. So we kind of recommend to build a little fence with pins, so you're kind of just making it, you put it back in the groove. If your elements have already drooped out and they're fairly old, they can be really brittle. So when you try to push them back into the groove, you can break them. But chances are you have to replace it anyhow, so you might as well try. One thing you can do is heat it up with a torch, and that gets it soft. So heat it up until it's kind of red, and then, of course, unplug your kiln first, and then kind of tuck it back in with a screwdriver, and then you can build that little post. And usually you can milk the elements quite a bit longer. We say to try to milk them as long as, before you have to replace a bunch of elements, because it's always nice to replace all your elements at once, and replace the brick when you have to replace your elements, because you already have the elements out of there. Does that answer your question?
It does, and thank you very much. That fence idea is terrific. I will try that.
Okay, great. Can you hear me, Janelle?
Yes.
What was your question?
I was just wondering, I have two kilns and wondered how expensive it is to add the lid lift to those. I assume they'd be different sizes for different kilns, or is that how they work? Or?
Yeah, it's around $400 for the part. Can you turn your volume down a little bit?
Any better?
Can you hear me now? Yeah, that's much better.
Okay. Yeah, is that something that is pretty easy to install, or do I need to get someone to do that? Or?
Well, it's not hard. It's just very time consuming. It can take a couple hours. I've put them on before in like an hour and a half. There's a lot of screws involved because there's a lot of pressure to lift that lid up, so you need a lot of screws in the side to hold the bracketing in place.
Okay. And is that something that we would buy through you, or any kiln manufacturer would carry those, or?
Well, it has to be if you have a Skutt kiln, it would have to be our lid lifter. But we always recommend that people buy from their local distributor if possible. That way you can usually save on freight. We do sell parts direct, but with no discounts, and you have to pay the freight. And we usually only like doing that when it's kind of an emergency situation. You can't get a hold of your local distributor.
Are those brand specific, or is there one that would work just on any kiln? Or Is
They
the kiln I
are
bought at an
brand
auction?
specific.
Yeah. I bought,
Yeah,
okay, I bought
they
this
might.
at an auction. I don't even know what brand it is. So,
Well, if you call our technicians, we can probably figure out if it'll fit your kiln or not.
okay. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay. Hey, Mike, are you there? Can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. You had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, there's been some confusion. I've had some conversations with color manufacturers and distributors about the temperature equivalencies with different firing rates. And I just thought that might be something to talk about because I don't think a lot of people understand that.
Well, I think you're talking about heat work, and depending on how fast or how slow you're firing when you're in the last 100 or 200 degrees of the firing. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So heat work is a combination of time and temperature. I can get the same cone bend by firing really fast to a high temperature or really slow to a lower temperature. Now, Orton is the one who makes these cones, and they are the ones that assign the temperatures to each cone. Well, that temperature is only valid if your kiln is firing 108 degrees an hour during the last 100 degrees of the firing. And you can program it to fire 108 degrees an hour during that period of time. But if you're doing a ramp and hold program, which means you're writing your own programs, it's going to do as good as it can, but it may not be hitting that temperature or that temperature rate. It might be going 60 degrees an hour. And so if you write your own programs and put in the cone values that Orton gives you, and your kiln's firing slow, you're going to overfire. Now, the nice thing about cone fire mode, which I think every kiln manufacturer has on their kiln, is that it has the capability of automatically readjusting that temperature up and down. But if you're you're trying to do something special like growing crystal glazes or something like that, and you found a firing schedule out of a book that you have to enter in your ramp and hold mode, you really have to know how your kiln is firing at the end of the firing and how much power it has to get the rate that the firing recipe or firing program suggests in order to get the right cone bend. Does that make sense, Mike?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Also, there's a little discrepancy on Orton changed their cone values for 06 and cone 6 about 10 years ago or something. So sometimes if you're using an old firing program that is based on those old temperatures, you might want to readjust it. But most of you folks are using cone fire mode the whole time, so I wouldn't think it would be an issue. Okay, let's see. Pam Fellers, are you there, Pam?
Yes, I am.
Did you have a question?
No, I didn't. I just needed to know how to get the sound initially.
Okay, okay. Let me
Because
see,
I didn't realize we had to teleconference in to get it.
Okay, gotcha. All right, I'm going to turn your
So
mic
it's a
off.
little late, but all right, thank you.
Okay, all right. Chris Myers.
Yes.
Are you there, Chris?
Yes, I am.
All right, what was your question?
I have an older 1227. I was wondering, can I add the lid lifter to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Any Skutt 1227, you can add a lid lifter to.
Okay.
And like I said before, it takes about an hour and a half to put on. It's just a lot of screws. So.
All right. I have another question. You had in the
Sure.
presentation as far as 300 degrees about lifting the lid. We're usually waiting till 120 or lower, but we could lift it a little higher if we needed to.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we say in the catalog is 120 degrees, and that's based on every time that we say something in our manuals, this is all kiln manufacturers, we have to kind of count on the worst case scenario. So if you had just a really big sculpture in there and you were to open it 300 degrees and you would get some cool air on the top and it's still hot in the bottom, you know, extreme pieces like that, you have to be more sensitive with. Basically, the bigger piece, the more you want to be careful with it, because the differences between the expansion rates, you can get cracking. So on the majority of things that you're doing, you know, I asked a few people what they actually unload it and are not having problems with and are not hearing the pinging on the brick, and it was 300 degrees and below. And that's, you know, that can be a judgment call on you. I don't know if you're a store owner, but, you know, 300 degrees is still pretty hot, and somebody doesn't put their gloves on, you know.
Yeah.
I think a good rule of thumb is no sooner than 300 degrees, and preferably what it says in the manual, which is 125 degrees.
Right, okay. Yeah, you know, just sometimes you try to push it every now and then, but...
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We're usually 100 the lower, but... All right, thank you.
All right, you bet. All right, Christy, do you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
The safest place in the kiln when I'm loading my larger plates, like larger than 15 inches, we have had a few of them crack.
Okay. Well, that's one thing that I didn't mention that should have. When you're doing small loads or you have a large piece that you're really concerned about, anytime you can get close to the thermocouple in the middle of the kiln, that's the best spot. Do you know what temperature you were firing at and what program you were using when it cracked?
Yeah, we're just doing a medium fire, Kona 6.
Okay.
Fire.
And where have you had it in the kiln?
We usually place them in the middle, and sometimes we're putting that at an angle or one side's higher. And the last crack was kind of a round crack, if that makes any sense. Went around it.
A round crack on the edge?
Yes.
And did it have a sharp edge, the crack, or was it rounded?
Rounded.
Okay, so anytime the glaze is kind of rounded around the edge, that means it broke on the way up.
Okay.
If it broke on the way down, that means that you were going through maybe quartz inversion too fast. And since the glaze is already set, then it'll be sharp and jagged. But if it happens on the way up, that usually means that you're firing too fast for that piece through quartz inversion maybe, and or when you first start the kiln. So you might want to do a custom program where you slow it down between like 900 and 1100 degrees.
Or just a slow fire.
Yeah, a slow fire would be, yeah. The slower you fire, the better off you are. Yeah. So on large pieces, I would definitely recommend going slow fire.
It's not a stress crack in it before the crack you felt happened during the firing, not the piece didn't have a crack before it was loaded?
Well, that's possible. It could have had just kind of a hairline crack that you didn't notice. Sometimes it's hard to see that, and then when the kiln heats up and expands the piece, then it opens it up. But there's no way really to tell that. All right.
All righty.
All right, I'm going to take you. Let me see if there's any more questions. Cheryl, are you there?
I am.
Did you have another question?
I did. I'm just, our kiln's fairly new, a little over a year, and I'm new to the industry, and I'm looking for some kind of guideline on frequency of maintenance, how long to anticipate my thermocouple will last, my elements, all of that.
Okay. Well, one thing you might have noticed is that every kiln company runs kicking and screaming from answering questions about how long things last. And the reason is for that is because it varies so much. You know, things that make your elements last longer are, you know, low fire them, vent them, make sure you vacuum out your elements. You know, you should be able to get, you know, around 500 firings just low firing your kiln, which is what you probably are doing. The thermocouples, it depends what type of thermocouple you have, but the ones that we use mostly now, they're a type K thermocouple that don't have a protection tube over them. We don't like using protection tubes because there's kind of a delay before the thermocouple sees the heat, because it has to work its way through that tube. And if you're doing any pre-soaks, then it can actually overshoot the temperatures that you want. So the thermocouples we use, they don't last as long, but they're a lot less expensive. So I think they're $15, and we would probably recommend changing them out every 80 to 100 firings if you're low firing. But like I said, you got to just be in tune with your kiln, and you'll know when you need to replace it. If you're using witness cones and you see that cone starting to knuckle down on the shelf, that's a great indication that it's starting to overfire, because they all drift towards an overfire. And it just takes like 5 minutes to replace it. That's something that everybody should be able to replace themselves and show their employees how to replace themselves. We have videos online. If you go to our website, we have videos on you know, how to load your kiln, which you might want to watch after this. Changing thermocouples, changing elements, changing bricks. So a lot of this stuff you can do yourself, and a lot of times you have to do it yourself because you know, you're in a hurry, and the kiln repair guy says he can't get out there for a couple of weeks. So so it's a good idea to keep things in stock too. So keep a set of replacement elements in stock. Keep, you know, a couple thermocouples in stock. Keep some relays in stock. And that way you're prepared when things don't go down. A lot of times, you know, relays just go out. They're not going to, okay, well, it's been, you know, 400 firings, so my relay's going to go out. You know, they can go out, you know, the second time you fire the kiln if it's a bad relay. Or, you know, they can last 6 years. A lot of it depends on, you know, the heat that it's exposed to, what kind of programs you're running, how often it's cycling. So did that come anywhere close to answering your question?
Yes and no. Our kiln, according to the witness cones, has fired hot from the outset. So I guess what you're saying is if it gets hotter, we should look at change. It would be the thermocouple that gets changed versus what? It's the thermocouple that's reading that temperature?
Yeah. If a brand new thermocouple still fires hot, then you might want to call our technicians, and we might want to do something called a cone offset, because a thermocouple and a controller have a certain degree of error to them right out of the chute. I mean, it might be 0 error, or it might be as much as I think we say 6 to 8 degrees. And if they're both erring in the same direction, then that can be as much as a half a cone. So you can try replacing the thermocouple. If that doesn't work, then you might want to call our technicians, and they can have you press a few buttons, and will actually make that kiln fire a little bit cooler.
And you talked about the Type K thermocouple. If you have a thermocouple that is sleeved, is that interchangeable with your newer unsleeved thermocouple?
Yeah, as long as there's type K and type S's, and I think there's type R's. We sell the S's and the K's. You can't replace a type K thermocouple with a type S thermocouple because the signals are slightly different. So you need to, on our newer units, there's a little pin setting that you can change on there, but you'd also need to change all your thermocouple wire. So you want to know whether it's a type K thermocouple. If it's a type K and it fits into the thermocouple block, then that should be okay. But you might have to, if it has a cover on it, chances are it's going to be a little bit wider in diameter than ours, and you might have to drill out the brick to make it fit.
Thank you.
All right, you bet. Well, I don't, oh, wait, we got maybe some more. No, I don't think we have any more questions. So, like I said, if you have any more questions, you can always call us here at Skutt. We're open 5 days a week from 7 to 5 o'clock on the Pacific Coast time. And thanks for joining the meeting.